Hey book lovers, we are Ellen and Sarah and this is Besties and Books, where we drink wine, share laughs, talk fantasy and all the stories that steal our hearts.
So book lovers, we are halfway through the year. I cannot believe it, which means it's officially time for a Besties and Books mid-year check-in.
We have read fantasy, romantasy, dark romance, historical fiction, mystery, and maybe a few chaotic curveballs thanks to our TBR jars.
Today, we are recapping every book we've read so far in 2025. What we loved, what made us scream, which ones we wish we could unread.
So grab a glass of wine or your favourite drink, settle in, and let's see which books are making our best of the year list so far and which are already strong contenders for our next reading slump. We have nearly 20 books to review today, so let's get into it. To kick off our mid-year review, we have Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. And before I get into our review of this book, please note this will contain spoilers for Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. I won't spoil Onyx Storm for you, so if you haven't read Onyx Storm yet, you're in the clear, but it will spoil Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. With that being said, this book was released, end of January?
I think so. Yes, January.
Yeah. And it's book 3 in the Empyrean series. This was the series that got me back into reading, so to say I was excited to read it, oh my God, so excited. It gave me all the nostalgic feelings. I loved being back with Violet and Xaden. I loved the dragons. I loved finding out what Violet's second signet was. I thought the pacing was pretty good. I enjoyed that the whole communication issues that we were experiencing between Violet and Xaden in Iron Flame weren't happening anymore. And Dana played a bigger role in this book, which I loved. And the ending, oh my gosh, it went off. I actually didn't understand the ending and I had to message Sarah and was like, what
did you think of this?
What did you think of this? What just happened?
I'm still not sure I understand the ending.
I cannot wait to reread it because I feel like I need to pick it apart more to understand what was going on. For me, I gave this book 5 stars, but I will say that acknowledging that I have a lot of bias towards this series and it would have been hard for it not to get 5 stars in my book, but I did love this
Agreed.
one.
I couldn't put it down. I very rarely would give out a 5-star, and I think it would be close, maybe 4.5, but close to 5,
which is very good for you. All right, let's get into book 2.
Right. Kingdom of Lies series. So book 1 is A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stacia Stark. Stacia Stark?
I think we would say it. Oh, is it Stacia?
I don't know.
I think it's very American to say Stacia.
Stacia. Is that Stacia or Stacia?
I think with an Australian accent we would say Stacia, but I think with an American accent it would be Stacia.
Let's do that again.
Yeah.
All right. Kingdom of Lies series. Book 1 was called A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stacia Stark. This is a romantasy series. It follows a young girl, Prissa, in a world where humans surrender their magic to the gods at birth in exchange for protection from the Fae. Those who retain their magic are deemed corrupt and are executed. When Prissa's hidden powers are discovered, she flees her village and forms a reluctant alliance with Lorien, a mysterious mercenary who has haunted her dreams for years. As their journey unfolds, Prissa uncovers secrets that could alter the fate of their world. This was a really fun read. We had enemies to lovers, we had the Fae versus human, wars, magic, found family, twists and betrayals, political intrigue. This for me, and I think probably fairly close with Ellen, started off as a solid 4-star book. But I did feel as the books progressed, I think there's 4 in the series. As the books progressed, it definitely in my mind slipped. Like it didn't have just the same sort of catchy writing. I wasn't desperate to continue reading. And I got, even in some books, like a little bit bored, which I didn't get bored at all in book 1. So it ended for me as a 3-star, but it was a very strong beginning. It just lost its way just a little bit.
I agree. It probably would have been better as a trilogy, I think. There was a lot of lulls that could have just been totally cut out. And also then I think the ending, by the end of book 4, it just all fell a bit flat. There were still some big reveals throughout, but I think it could have been condensed into a trilogy and then perhaps been a solid 4+ read. But like you, I enjoyed book 1. So the next book we read, actually this is in total random order. It wasn't the next book we read. Just throughout this year,
A book
we read Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha Tooley. This is part of a series called The Artifacts of Oranos. We're going to go with Oranos, the Artifacts of Oranos series. No, I made that mistake the first time. And in this book, we are following Law, who has to compete in a bachelor-style trials to win the Sun King's heart, and that pretty much summarizes the premise of the book. We found this book super bingeable, very easy to read. However, the main female character, Law, her inner dialogue was very tiresome, as Sarah would say, and the Sun King was a bit revolting, to be honest. So we don't believe he's the true love interest. We haven't read book 2 or continued the series just yet, but we plan to. And we don't believe he's the true love interest. That's just a prediction. But on face value from book 1, he was pretty ick. In saying that, there was also just a few issues, I think, with the trials. They were a little bit underwhelming. There were some friendships that were thrown in there that didn't really make sense or happen too quickly. So overall, I think we gave this a 3-star, but I would say it's a solid 3-star because it's super easy and bingeable to read, and it could get better.
All right, next we have Rage of Dragons, which is book 1 in the Burning series by Evan Winter. This was an epic fantasy novel set in the worn-torn society of the Amehi people, who have been engaged in an unwinnable conflict for hundreds of years. We follow Tao, who is a young man from a lower caste who initially dreams of a peaceful life, but after a personal tragedy, he becomes consumed with revenge and spends the rest of the book dedicating himself to becoming the greatest swordsman he can. So for this one, I loved the complex but relatable characters. There were some very impressive fight scenes that I was sort of gripped by. I thought they were beautifully written. He sort of gets a lot of his training at a fighting school. I really enjoyed the found family and the Sword Brothers, the bond he made there. The fantasy world was quite interesting. I really struggled with the pacing. It was so slow to begin with. The language was difficult in that the terminology for just the caste, society, the vocab all took some getting used to. So it was just really hard to get into. I think it was almost halfway through the book that I actually was really into it and enjoying it.
I think it was the 40% mark from memory, which is a decent way through for it was a longish book from memory, around 600 pages.
Yeah, I was expecting a lot of dragons, given it was called Rage of Dragons, and there was none really, except at the very end, which is fine. It was just my mind.
It shouldn't be called Rage of Dragons, though.
So I think, and I forget what you rated it, but for me it was about a 3, maybe 3.5, because I think it was very well written. I just couldn't get that into it. And we haven't. We may continue with the series. I'm not sure. I would actually be happy to go either way. I could read another one, or I could just leave it.
Well, the thing is, we can't spend 40% of a book getting into it again. So I'm happy to go into book 2. But if I get to even the 20% mark and it's like started off really slowly again, it'll get DNF'd. Yeah. But like you, I was pretty I got addicted by that 40-50% mark, and it was beautifully written after that. It was just a slog. I think Rage of Demons would have been a better name for this book rather than Rage of Dragons, because there were lots of demons and they had a lot of rage, but not so much the dragons. All right, and I think I gave it 3.5 as well. Next on our list is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This was a mystery pick from our mystery genre TBR jar, and it's a series. I can't remember how many books are in this series, but I think it's 4+. Anyway, we read book 1, and it follows a high school student. Her name is Pippa, and she, for a school research project, she decides to investigate a alleged suicide of one of her classmates a few years ago. She embarks on this journey of, I guess, doing all this research and covering all these truths, speaking to people nearby, and you're really in it with her, investigating what really happened to her college or her school friend, Sal Singh was his name. And so it was pretty gripping in that I felt I was in it with Pippa, trying to investigate this suicide or murder or whatever it's turning into at this point. In saying that, it was written quite young. So it's definitely young adult. There were some heavy themes, but I still think it was on the young adult side. Very easy to read. Where there's some silly decisions that Pippa made throughout the process that I thought there's no way that would happen in real life. Yes,
bit far-fetched, yes.
Yeah, a bit far-fetched, yeah. But it was still gripping and tension-filled.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. And I think overall we both gave it around, I think I gave it 4 stars. I can't remember what you, maybe you were 3. Yeah, 4. Yeah, solid 4 stars for the first book in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and would recommend.
All right, next up, Heavenly Bodies by Imani Iru. So this was another romantic.
And I'm making this face because this is one of my most anticipated reads. Anyway, yeah, go.
This was a romantasy novel, and as Ellen said, she was so desperate to read this one. We follow Alara, who is Princess of Asteria. Her life is upended at the beginning of the novel when Ariette, the Star of War, murders her parents and seizes her throne. So fleeing for her life, Alara seeks refuge in Helios, a rival kingdom, on the condition that she trains to become a weapon capable of killing a star. So Prince Lorenzo of Helios, he is assigned to train her, and from the get-go, their relationship is just fraught with tension. So what do we love about it? It was, again, very bingeable, super entertaining. The world building was interesting with the celestial magic, the gods all based on various zodiac signs. A female lead with shadow powers. That was a bit of a twist on the usual shadow power skills. I thought the banter between the main characters was very enjoyable. I struggled with the pacing, definitely. So at the beginning, it sort of was, the writing was quite beautiful. It was slow and descriptive. And then just as the book progressed, it became a bit of a whirlwind of chaos, and it was a bit hard to follow at times. There were too many fantasy elements, I think, thrown in, and for seemingly no purpose, like scenes with mermaids that sort of went nowhere, and various mythical angelic beings that, again, I'm not quite sure what the point of some of them was.
Like, think of every single fantasy trope you could picture was thrown in there, right?
Yes. Yeah. Again, the two main characters, for me, their relationship development was a little bit jarring. They seemed to jump from the enemies to lovers like in a flash, and I wasn't quite sure where they got from A to B, but I did enjoy it, and I'm actually really looking forward to book 2. I think we rated this one possibly in the 3.5.
I think I gave it a 3 in the end but I will preface that with saying I was expecting this to be 5 stars, and so it was quite disappointing for me, and perhaps I rated it lower than what it deserved.
Okay. Yeah, 3 to 3.5.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. And then the next, we have the 5-book incredible series by St. Abbey, the Mind Effed series. This one follows Lana, who is a serial unaliver, and Logan, who is the FBI agent investigating the unaliving that Lana is committing. What a tongue twister. This is a 5-book series, but each book is super short. They're about 100 pages long. Oh my gosh, was this gripping from the beginning. I was totally hooked. I was looking forward to picking it up every single day. I was abandoning the kids, abandoning the husband. I was so into this series, and I was devastated when it finished. It put me in the biggest book slump. My only critique was I didn't like the epilogue. But even that, because the series was so good, it didn't even really bump it down a star for me at all. I loved it so much. Easiest 5 stars that I've given probably this year, other than Onyx Storm. And I think you echo that. I think you gave it 4.5.
Yeah.
But like Sarah says, it would have to be a book that she said in the past that you would reread again and again and again, God tier sort of thing, for Sarah to give it 5 stars. Whereas I have 5 stars, and then I have God tier. In saying that, love the series, would highly, highly, highly recommend. But, sorry, I should say this is a dark romance, so check your trigger warnings. There are some super dark themes discussed in this book and that not all readers are going to be comfortable with, so check your triggers.
Yep. Next up is Descendant series by Ingrid J. Adams. This is a 4-book fantasy series, 3 of which have been released so far. We follow here the story of Indigo Wolf, initially a high school student who is struggling with some extraordinary empathic abilities that allow him to feel others' emotions. In high school, he meets a girl, Cordelia Carlyle, which sort of is the beginning of what becomes a very profound connection that we soon learned has transcended multiple lifetimes. Throughout the series, their bond, their relationship is tested by a number of things. You know, there's Indigo's internal struggles, his mental health, society pressures. Then we get some crazy supernatural, paranormal elements that come into the mix and try and separate them. And throughout the 3 books, there's a real question underpinning the series of, can you alter your fate, or just some things that are going to happen always going to happen? So what I love about it, well, it was Australian author, set in Sydney in the 90s. There was plenty of 90s nostalgia, which was quite enjoyable. The author, I thought, dealt very well with some fairly heavy themes like depression and suicide. She also blended, we sort of get the everyday mix of the 90s just in suburban Sydney with fantasy elements, and I'm talking witches and all sorts of powers. So it was a bit of at times it was sort of a bit jarring to read, but I think it actually worked quite well. There's obviously the sort of the found family elements. I thought it was very fresh and original. That was great to read. And as the books progressed, the writing improved exponentially. The writing, the plot, the storytelling, I just thought like every book was just, you know, a new level. So I struggled at times with the pacing, particularly I think in the first and second book. It jumps around a little bit with the time. You know, we jump forward 2 years all of a sudden. Yeah. And it almost made some of the earlier parts of the book a little bit, not like pointless, or like you could have done them in a flashback as opposed to just, you know, jumping forward 2 years. With the main characters, some of the feelings and emotions didn't feel very personal sometimes. As a reader, I almost felt like I was being told that they loved each other rather than just seeing them and seeing their actions and hearing it. Yep. So for me, and I think for Ellen too, the series started as more of a 2.5 to 3 star, but by book 3, it was up to close to 4 star for me. It just improved that much every book.
I agree. Book 3 was just a total contrast to book 1, and I agree on that rating. The next book on our list is Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, another Australian author. So this book follows Kiva, and she works as a healer in the infirmary in the renowned Zalendov prison. She is required to compete in these trials by ordeal. So they go by each of the, I guess, elements. So you've got earth, fire, water, and air. Yeah, that's right. And I would say it's YA, young adult. It was a romantasy, but it didn't focus heavily, I would say, on the romance. That was kind of like a minor subplot, at least in book 1. The book was quite beige, as Sarah would describe it. It was very, very slow. Super easy to read, but very slow. However, the ending had us shook. It was an epic cliffhanger ending. It left us thinking about the ending for days and bumped up the star rating so much higher by the end, and we are dying to read book 2. Overall, I think I gave the book a 4 star just because the ending had me shook, but it was probably closer to a 3.5.
Agreed. Yeah. If not for the ending, it would have got a much lower rating in my mind. Which makes me excited for book 2, because I think, it feels like we're just stepping up in terms of the plot and the excitement and the fantasy elements. So hopefully we'll see.
Hopefully it works out. All right, what have we got next?
All right, Ember in the Ashes by Sabah Tahir. So this is another fantasy novel set in the brutal martial empire and is inspired by ancient Rome. The story follows 2 protagonists from opposing worlds So Leia is a scholar girl seeking to rescue her brother, and Elias is a very reluctant soldier yearning for freedom. Now their paths cross a couple of times throughout the book, and by the end we get the feeling that they're heading in the same direction for book 2. So book 1 really to me feels like a bit of a setup for bigger and better things. I enjoyed the book. It was very bingeable. I didn't think there were like massive highs or twists or anything, but it was just a sort of a solid, enjoyable read. You know, we have the sort of chosen one elements, oppressive regime, secret resistance, beginnings of forbidden love, tests and trials, some interesting historical some historical backdrop as a setup. I think what let the book down was that it was very monotone. There were no real highs and lows. And so it just was a little bit flat for me. There was also quite a lot of internal dialogue going on in the main characters' heads, which got somewhat tiring, and not really much on the fantasy side. No, I'd like to see more about the magic systems, hopefully in book 2. So all over, I think this was a 3 to 3.5 star read.
Yeah, I actually gave it a higher star rating, which is interesting. I gave it 4.
Oh, okay.
I loved this book. I thought it was super fast paced, but I do agree. So it was fast paced. It was set in an academic setting. I didn't enjoy the main female lead, but I really liked the main male lead, Elias, and his battle with choosing what is right and what he wants to do. And I liked his friend Helene. So I liked that. But for me, the ending, there was just, like you said, there was no major plot twist. There was no major events, really. It just sort of followed this sort of fast-paced action throughout. It just moved along. I don't know how else to say it. There was no major plot twist. So it was a 4 for me, but I'm excited to read book 2 because I'm hoping the relationships develop, the magic system goes outside of the academy and we learn more and more. The next book on our list is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This was one of our mystery genre picks. So it's a historical fiction that follows two sisters, Vienne and Isabel, I think it is. Yeah. So basically the Nazis are invading France and they're thrown into war, and we follow these two women who are very, very different. So two sisters who are very different in how they approach, I guess, the war and defend their country of France. Isabel is very not wanting to get along with the Nazis, in fact wants to fight with the rebellion, and she's quite outspoken and takes a lot of risk, whereas Vienne just wants to get by. She just wants to get through it, and she's just waiting for her husband Anton to return from being at the front. So this book was pretty slow, I would say. Not a lot happens until about, I think, just over 50% of the book, and then sort of the first major twist occurs. But it's very slow paced. But I think there was a purpose to that. I think the author wanted us to get to know what it was like to live throughout the war in a realistic setting and not dramatize it, or just not dramatize it. I think that was the author's intention. I think it was done on purpose to reflect the reality of war, and it was really hard to read in that aspect.
And to show a perspective from the women at home. It doesn't, it doesn't focus at all on the soldiers fighting. It's all about the ones left behind and how that was tough in its own way as well.
Exactly. There was a huge focus on the women left behind and what their role was in the war, and even what they experienced and what their lives were like, and how everything changed, and how some of them even fought, and all those fighters that were women that I guess were forgotten about even after the war. The whole premise of the book was having their stories told. So that was really beautiful. It was just slow. I don't know how else to say. It was just slow, in saying that the ending had me tearing up. Definitely shed a few tears at that. It was quite emotional. So I think I gave this book a 3.5 star from memory. Perhaps it's just not my thing. I appreciated the book for what it was, but it's not the kind of book that I would be dying to pick up and read again, I guess.
All right, next we have something a little bit more lighthearted. The Crimson Moth and the Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciparelli. So a little fantasy duology. We both loved this duology. So it starts off, there is a brutal revolution, and now the once powerful witches have been reduced to being the hunted outcasts. So in this duology, we followed two main characters, Rune and Gideon. Rune is a witch and Gideon is a witch hunter. And they try to deceive each other to protect their conflicting agendas. So you can imagine the sort of tensions that we have brewing here with the witch and the witch hunter. Well, I loved the enemies to lovers arc. It was beautifully done. It wasn't forced.
So
it wasn't overly dramatic just for the sake of drama. It was just entertaining, honest, like beautiful. The forbidden magic system of the witches with the runes and the spells and using the knives to sort of like carve intricate designs on their skins was interesting. I hadn't seen that in any other books. The pacing was on point. I couldn't put it down. I think I binged the first book in probably 2 days, and then would have done the same with the second, but got sort of distracted with real life, so I had to put it aside for a few more days. But still, I think I'd read them both within a week. It was just, you know, a great poolside read. And even though I guessed quite a few of the twists in book 1 and 2, it didn't matter. I still loved it. That didn't bother me at all. What I would have liked to see more of was Rune really step into her magic and fully learn the full breadth of her skill. We didn't really get to see that by the end of, I guess that's, you know, when you have a duology, you just don't have time to flesh that sort of detail out. Yeah. And there are a few of the other plot lines that I would have liked to shed a bit more light on, such as, I won't give it away, but Serafina, one of Rune's, I guess, close acquaintances. There's a bit of a backstory with her that I think sort of was just like, oh, that's a surprise, but nothing was really, we didn't really delve into it. And then perhaps even with Gideon's, so, you know, there's obviously some loyalty shifts that both Rune and Gideon go through throughout the duology, but Gideon's loyalty shift at one point, I wasn't quite sure what his motivation was. Like, was he just doing it for Rune, or did he sort of see some issues with the existing regime? I sort of wasn't quite sure that I think they could have fleshed out his decision making and his thinking a bit more. But overall, solid 4-star in my mind. You might have rated it slightly higher, did you?
I think I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I was obsessed with it. I know. I guess the plot, like, were there even plot holes throughout the books? Yes. Could I predict the ending? Yes. Was it young adult? Yes. Don't care. Loved it. The books are so short too. Each book is, I think, 300 pages or less. And it was just so bingeable. And I recommend it to everyone. It's such a good entry-level duology to fantasy romance, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, now it's time to switch things up, people, because how do I even begin? We are on to The Reign of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Rorick. This is dark. Emphasis on Jock. Jock? My name is Jock. Emphasis on dark. This is a very dark series. Check your triggers. So in this book, we are following Theon and Tessa. Now, the whole premise of this book is around gods and demigods, fae, and then humans, I guess, underneath, as it were. So you have the gods. They then had the legacy, which are demigods, and to keep the legacy in check, they have the fae, who have their own power, who have to become a source to the legacy. And what that source bond does is the fae feeds their magic to the legacy to make them more powerful, but they can't be, or the legacy can't be without the source. And I think once that bond's created, I'm pretty sure one can't be without the other. However, this creates a power dynamic between Theon, who's the legacy in this book, and Tessa, who is the fae who becomes Theon's source. And he is emotionally manipulative and abusive. He basically holds her hostage to his every whim throughout the entire 750 pages of this book. It is long, it is depressing, it is dark. In saying that, was it gripping? Could I put it down? No. I don't know what's wrong with me. I must be sick in the head because I could not put it down.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking forward to reading it, but I was so desperate to know what happens. I'm determined for her to just kick his ass in book 2, and that is the only reason why we continue with this series. He's got to go. He's got to die. I don't know how, but he has got to go. He is the worst MMC I have ever read in my entire life, and I think you would say that. You would second that.
I fear that he's going to have a redemption arc, and I don't want him to. I just want him to die.
I have said this before, the only way that he could have a redemption arc is because his father is so evil, he plans on total world domination and killing everybody, humans, legacy, fae, all alike. And so he has to manipulate Tessa to be his source and feed him his power over to overthrow his father. But even then, his inner monologue doesn't even align with that objective. And so I don't see him having a redemption arc. Yeah, he's revolting. Revolting.
Oh, well, we'll find out soon when we go to book 2.
So I give this book no rating, and the reason is I hated him so much that I would give it a 1 star, and it was just really dark. But it was so gripping and I couldn't put it down. It really deserves a 4 star, especially she makes a comeback. So I really struggle between those 2 ratings. I mean, if you averaged it out, it's probably a 3, but let's leave it at no rating from me for now, at least until I get to book 2, and then maybe I can reflect.
And it better get better in book 2.
Yeah, I am not reading another 750 pages of that manipulative relationship. I will DNF it.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, a little bit different. Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang. So this is another epic fantasy book set in the Kaiganese Empire, which is a nation known for its formidable warriors who can wield ice and water elemental magic. We follow here the Matsuda family, and they're an old warrior family that live in a very strategic stronghold of the empire. Now, as the book progresses, various members of the family learn some unsettling truths about the empire, and that sort of initially really shakes their confidence.
Shakes their world, really.
Yeah, shakes their confidence in the empire. And then also they are facing the looming threat of war. So there's a build-up in the book to sort of some invaders attacking them, which does eventuate, and it's just how this family deals with the war as it progresses. I love that it was the cultural setting, so it's very heavily inspired by Japanese culture and traditions, which I hadn't seen before in a fantasy book. I really loved that the mum of 4, who hadn't picked up a sword in years, turns out to be like the total badass warrior and saves all the women that are left in the house when the men go off fighting. That was, for me, like the best part of this book. The water and the water ice magic system, that was also fascinating to read about. I would have liked probably some more information on, I wasn't quite clear on how the magic worked exactly and how it manifested, because different families or nations seem to have different types of magic and different names for the magic. So some elaboration on that would have been helpful as a reader. The pacing was a bit off, I thought, like a very, very slow at the beginning and what felt like a really long, slow outro. But the middle 40% of the book was 5 star. If only like the author could have just harnessed that 40% and somehow made the whole book like that, it would have been a 5 star. But in the end, I settled on a 3 to 3.5 star, because the beginning and the end sort of lost it a bit for me.
Agreed. I think even the ending was setting it up for a sequel, like it was trying to almost start a book 2, but it just fell super, super flat. And I loved the main Misaki, so the mother of 4. I loved her relationship with her developing relationship with her husband throughout the book. That was also a highlight for me, and how that dynamic unfolded by the end. But agree on that rating. It was the pacing was off. It was so off. So many highs and lows, and it just unfortunately didn't hit the mark. All right, the next one. I read this one on my own, but I thought I'd include it because it is trending all over BookTok at the moment, and that is Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. This is a dark romance. When I listened to it on Audible and going into it, I didn't realise it was a stalker romance. Probably a good thing, because I never would have picked it up. But like, it was so light on the stalker. It was only probably in the first little section of the book, and by the end the stalkering behavior was explained and almost justified. I know that sounds so weird with me saying, but he has a bit of a past and it makes sense why he had those tendencies. It was a really good audible book as well. It was a really good audio book as well. I recommend listening to it on audio. It was super fast paced, and I guess the main female character, the premise of the story, if we backtrack a little bit, she is a nurse and she works at a hospital, and she's dating some guy who's not really interested in her, and she ends up following this other guy on Instagram who uploads very saucy images of himself wearing a, I guess, creepy mask, and she comments on his posts all the time. Anyway, she ends up breaking it off with this other guy, and it turns out that the guy with the mask is his roommate. And so he learns that they've split, and he's like got some interest there, so he wants to know if she is true to her word with one of her comments that she would like him to film in her bedroom. So while she's out at work, he breaks into her home and films a saucy video in her bedroom and then uploads it. And when she realizes, she is obviously horrified. But it all works out in the end. Like, yes, it's a dark romance. Yes, check your triggers. But in terms of their relationship, it was pretty light. There are some kinks, I guess some darker kinks involved, but it's nothing. There's no abuse. There's no harm. There's no pain. There's none of those things that you would sort of picture in a dark romance. Everything is very consensual. And yeah, there's no pain. So it was a very enjoyable, light read, watching their relationship develop, and by the end it turns into a bit of a murder mystery towards the end that they start investigating. My only criticism to this book was that it was too long, so I think it should have finished at about the 85 to 90% mark. The last 10% I just didn't care. I didn't care about the outcome of the murder mystery. I was reading it about their relationship and how that was developing. So I was just like, murder mystery, don't care who it is, how that all works out. So overall, I think I gave it a 4-star.
Okay.
And I highly recommend it.
A good holiday read. I need a holiday read coming up.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's it.
That is a wrap from us today. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button, give us a big thumbs up, and drop us a comment below telling us which books you are reading this month. Until next time, bye.
Bye.